Hi, I'm Bob,
And I'm Sherry.
and this is Mostly Politics with Bob and Sherry.
And today we have the pleasure to interview Mr. Chris Frye, who is currently the mayor of Newcastle and also the candidate for lieutenant governor with the Republican Party. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me to Mostly Politics.
So, Chris, you talk a lot about servant leadership and contrast. Can you contrast that with traditional politics, traditional leaders, and how you would apply that in a lieutenant governor position?
Yeah, servant leadership is an important concept for me. Being in leadership positions, started to study this at Gannett University as the vice president of our leadership club, and it's a concept that really, put yourself, or put yourself back, and put everybody else's self interest and issues before me, before you as the leader. It's one that, again, you kind of lead from behind and uplifting other folks' priorities to find solutions. And I see that you know we're public servants first before politicians, before any of our own self-interest. We're public servants first. So I think that servant leadership applies across the board, and just like with anything, any business, any profession, you really have to find your that you know go back to the original purpose and doing, and doing the work to its fullness. And I think truly having that servant leadership perspective, and guiding those guiding principles are really what will change, whatever community or state or our nation, if we truly have that perspective and lead that way.
Have you always want to be a public servant?
No, I haven't. I went on to college at Gannett University like many students, unknowing, not knowing what profession I was going to go into. Some know that they're going to be a doctor, lawyer, nurse. I went in with the intentions, I grew up in a very, low income household, single mom. She raised four kids. She was a teen mom, had four kids before she was 18 years old. And I just wasn't sure. I knew I wanted to change my circumstances, so I was willing to work hard. I knew, America gave us the liberty and the freedom to do that, and to be able to explore various aspects of life that would help us, get out of our circumstances. So, like many students, and we joke about it all the time, is like I changed my major five times. Honestly, I went from nursing, I went to business, I went to general studies, and I landed in social work. I landed in a field that I was aware of. I knew, the inner workings of the social, the welfare system, being that we had to use some of those services growing up. And then just, and thinking about it, wanted to really be a motivator and influence change and help folks get out of their situation just like I was doing in my life and my family's life.
So, what do you tell the young people, especially in the African American community? Now, you grew up, your mom is a single teen mom, raised four kids. I mean, you could be part of the statistic. Instead, now you're the mayor of Newcastle and running for lieutenant governor. What do you tell the people thinking there's no hope, and what message do you have for them?
Yeah, I just really just try to inspire people, obviously use my message and my story, but then I also just try to help them, be more optimistic, have that glass half full kind of perspective on life. We have opportunities right before us. You know, some some of us have obstacles that are way worse than where I came from. But being in America, being in Pennsylvania, and having these opportunities and these freedoms given to us, we could use that to our advantage, honestly. And education is being one of the biggest ones. Using your education and those opportunities. I always talk about two relationships, and resources. I teach this when I was I ran a juvenile probation program. Youth that started out their life, making tough, bad decisions. And, I tell them all the time, use your resources, use me, use your counselors, use your probation officers, and really you can truly change your life. You don't have to, it's not about where you start, but to really bring change and to address those things head on, you can really, you know, you can change the course of your life. So just trying to be a motivator, inspiring, young folks to take a look at it, from that glass half full perspective, and not half empty.
So, black man, grew up in poverty, welfare, social worker. If I told everybody that, they'd tell me I just described a Democrat. Well, why are you a Republican, or how did you become a Republican?
I wasn't raised that way. I wasn't taught to be a victim. I wasn't taught to use the system or to rely on the government. I was raised with very strong principles of faith, having a strong family, and working hard and serving my community. Although we were receiving a lot of services from the governmental services and community services to help us change our life. We have a Habitat for Humanity house that we grew up in. We had food stamps. We went to slept in shelters. We relied on the benevolence of our church and our church community. We were never taught those principles. Even still, it was always that we can, through hard work, we can get out of it. I know I'm an oxymoron to the conservative party, but there's truth in the conservative party that if you use those principles, you can get out of you can get out of that situation, and you can just live your life, your personal life, um, very successfully.
What it's like to run for mayor in Newcastle, as a Republican, as a conservative, because you have to overcome 3-1 Democrat to Republican voter registration there.
Yes, yeah, it was when I first started, you had the naysayers. You'll never win here. You don't have the name. You've never been in politics before. Your story's not going to resonate. Things of that nature. Even some of the more hardcore, there's racism and all these things, and classism that people aren't going to connect with. But I look at again, building relationships was my key platform point in terms of how do we overcome these situations. I was just endorsed by the Frederick Douglass Foundation, and while I could not fathom what Frederick Douglass had to go through to lead the charge on the emancipation of slaves. I can see that he focused on relationship building, and his relationships with Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party and the abolitionists really helped him change one of the most heinous and hard times of American history. And that is something that I look at now, and it's applicable to what's going on in society today. If we focus on relationship building, focus on uh, you know, who we are together as a people, focus on even just your small core, right? If it's just your family or your neighbors or your community or your church, we will get so much further and really bringing it, I don't want to say condensing it, but really bringing back those little pockets of communities that all helped us thrive. Right now, our mindset is so grandiose. We see the world in such a bigger view, at a much bigger vantage point than in the past, and we can truly effectuate change if we kind of reel that back in and we start to do it. But Newcastle was, we had some major problems. We had some major issues on a internal government and externally, being a Rust Belt community, being economically distressed. My goal was to win the trust of the voters, and then by winning the trust, work with them to create the community that they wanted to see. And I'm happy to say that we're doing that today on multiple levels.
What it, what do you see as the issues facing Pennsylvania in the context of the lieutenant governor office, and what would you like to do as lieutenant governor?
I see the biggest issue with the lieutenant governor is just kind of restoring what that job and the role of that position. You know, again, that's not a sexy topic to talk about at all, but it's truly, if we want to have good government, if we want to have trust in our governmental systems, we have to do the job right. We have to. We've seen after term where lieutenant governor and governor haven't had a good relationship. And I can associate that more with, maybe it's egos, clashing of egos. And that's where we go back to that servant leadership perspective. I don't need to be put on a pedestal. I just want to do what's right by the people. I want to follow the Pennsylvania Constitution correctly. I want to follow the U.S. constitutional as it's written, and those are the things that I think all politicians and all folks in public service need to be thinking about more. Let me do my job right, right? Not mislead, not misrepresent our constituents. But if we do the job right, let the legislators be the legislators, let the executive branch be the executive branch, let the judicial branch be the judicial branch. But then also fighting for justice. In the meantime, if something's gone wrong or gone awry, we need to still have that accountability measures. But the lieutenant governor job is very important. Presiding over the Senate, being able to evaluate and influence, policy decisions that represent the people, chairing the board of pardons, making sure, clemency is given to those who have earned it or will be productive citizens, and then clemency is not given to the ones who are violent and would impose a risk to our communities. But at the same time, there's other initiatives that can be taken on, and those are the other initiatives that I see as supporting all 2,500 or more municipalities. Decisions can be made in the governor are going to be made in the governor's office and in the General Assembly that are going to trickle down and affect the places that we call home. They're going to affect our hometowns, our school districts, our taxpayers, and the lieutenant governor can play a huge role in disseminating that information and supporting that in his role. Again, we have to have a receptive governor. We have to have a receptive General Assembly, but I don't think having that ego clash would benefit at all because the door could be shut instantly. I've seen it. I've experienced it here in Newcastle. But again, holding true to what I believe in, building those relationships and talking to the folks and bringing the problems and the issues of the taxpayers before our council, before the legislature, and in any meeting that I go to has shown again to be a model that can be um, adapted to, I think, state government.
As a mayor of Newcastle, what are the challenges you're facing, especially on budgetary issues, being it's like a Rust Belt, rundown town, and also come out of COVID? What are some of the challenges, and what are you doing about it?
Well, when I came in, Newcastle had been an Act 47 economically distressed community since 2007. And we have, when I took office, I took it at a time that was do or die. It was our 3-year exit plan. We needed to get out or we were going to receivership. And that more state resources would have been deployed and took over our operations, our collective bargaining agreements and things like that. Um, when I came in again, it was a tough time financially. It was a tough time for our economy, our businesses, our business sector. So the public, and I put myself in that, we were all feeling the effects of being this distressed community. And Newcastle, for those that will be listening that understand financing, we were in the red, for years to come. So my goal was to really, number one, protect the taxpayers, protect our community, put things in play, make decisions that would loosen the burden, financial burden on the folks that live here. And then that's taxpayers and businesses. So what we did early on, 2020, we all know we all felt went through COVID and battled with the decisions that came from our state government. You know, I was right there, and what kind of prompted me was that representation that I don't feel like we had fully from the state government. So Newcastle is in a much better position today, I say, because of that type of leadership that I explained earlier, um, and taking the interest in the issues of the people first. We were projected at having, a deficit year over year. We were able to curb that by, making tough decisions internally and also looking at resources. You hear gubernatorial candidates talk all the time about the economy, utilizing our energy sources, unleashing, fracking, finding wasteful spending and stopping that. And those were the things that I've done here as mayor. So I don't want to go in and into the office and say, I know the answer, but no, I can contribute to the conversation. I can contribute to what's happening in local communities all across Pennsylvania. We're not the only Act 47 city. Harrisburg's been in it. Pittsburgh's been in it. I believe there's 14 now that are in Act 47. And then there's a lot of communities that are just trying to, that are right on the brink of entering something like that. We just need sound, strong leadership who will help create opportunities um, on a fiscal level, and then we will see by doing that, I believe we will help solve our crime problems. We'll provide opportunities for our youth. We'll provide opportunities for business growth um, throughout Pennsylvania, and it's really just protecting the taxpayers and taking their interests above ours.
With hindsight now, as we look back over COVID and how Pennsylvania handled it, the policies that were implemented, knowing everything that we know now, what would you have done differently if you could, go back in time policy wise and how the governor, the state government handled COVID?
From a lieutenant governor standpoint or from the mayor standpoint?
I guess just in a policy standpoint, governor, lieutenant. I mean, I realize the position's lieutenant governor. I guess I'm just looking
Right.
for, your perspective on the policies that the governor would have really implemented.
Yeah, I think the simple question is choice. I mean, when it comes down to mandates and vaccines, we see, that there was this top-down approach rather than this bottoms-up approach of, how do you see this taking place in your community? I think that goes back to choice. Instead of having the harsh mandates that force businesses to shut down, that put our students and our kids behind academically, we needed to take those things into consideration first, the impacts that harsh mandates would have had, and I think we could have done that by just kind of opening it up, explaining what the situation was, how hard the COVID, the effects of COVID, that what it would do to senior citizens, what it would do to our youth. I understand that it took some time for the science to come out, whatever science that there was that around COVID, if there was any, but I think more so, it should have been more of a bottoms up approach. It should have been choice. We should have pulled municipal officials into in more conversation rather than just pushing them aside or saying, "Don't worry, you'll get ARPA money down the road." I think it should have been more of a conversation, and we should have pulled people together to help guide those decision making.
So more of a individual and community risk assessment approach. What are the risks of
Absolutely.
COVID to certain individuals, certain communities, and what are the risks of the lockdowns, and some of the
Yeah,
mandates that we had? And okay.
absolutely.
So, you have children, right? How many kids do you have?
I have three
Yeah,
kids.
three kids. My goodness. What's your thoughts on our education system and the teaching of the CRT and also the teaching of gender identity to young kids like kindergarten through third grade?
I think our education system is just packed with, things that I think are unnecessary. When you talk about CRT and putting that in the curriculums, or even just teachers, teaching out, whether it's in the curriculum or they're just talking and teaching history from a CRT perspective, I don't think that's right. We're missing the boat in testing. We're missing the boat in academic achievement in many of our communities. We need to prioritize what's important. I think again, going back to, I don't think the school system is designed to take on the role as being a parent or take on the role of being a social service agency. Um, Obviously, there's school social workers, there's counselors who have that job. But from a teaching perspective, your job is to teach. We should not be uh, substituting, math for CRT or history for CRT. We need to be teaching what's important so we can have the academic achievements, um, you know, in comparison to other, more successful states, more successful countries. And I see that, I look at those issues when you talked about risk assessment. We got to be strategic in our approach. You know, I don't like being number uh, 49 out of 50. I want to be number one. So really, we have to set our standards there for excellence. We have to set our standards there for what we want to accomplish and achieve. And, diluting that with, you know, identity theory or identity politics and putting that into the classroom is not going to help us get to that point. Um, More so, I think it's gonna make academics um, less desirable for students and parents. But then on the side of school choice, I graduated from Kennedy Catholic. Um, it was a sacrifice for my family. My mom made a huge sacrifice to send me 30 minutes away to school every day for 4 years, and I see the value in that. It really helped shape me, as a young kid, being able to go to school and pray and fast and focus on my spiritual development in addition to my academics. Um, there's certain, we have to have a competitive system. And I think school choice is the way to go, especially for a lot of urban communities where public schools don't have the resources, or parents are felt strapped and they don't have the resources to send their kids or to get them tutoring and additional support. I don't think it's just continuously funding failing schools. We need the money should follow the kid. And I felt that both as being a student and having to pay my way through uh, high school, and then also as a parent. My kids attended private school, the same private school that I went to. And it was hard and it was a sacrifice for us for 4 years. And um, I don't think it's right. I think we should have that option to do it.
Why did your mom send you 30 miles away to I mean, with all the stresses, pressures of a low income single mom, why would she add the extra stress of you going
That's
30
a good
miles away?
question. That's a good question. My mom is a very strong woman. She has a strong faith in her beliefs, and she has no problem acting on that. And it was a tough time in my life. I was 15 years old. I had a severe back injury playing sports. I had high ambitions to go on and like many kids, play in the NFL or go to college and play D1. And I had a bad back injury. It was like my life was going in that direction, and then abruptly shifted where I was paralyzed from the waist down. Spent a month, I had a major back surgery. Spent a month in a Shady Side Hospital rehabilitation center, and I think my mom just interceded in prayer, and she felt as though you know I could either stay in a public school where the likelihood of me taking the wrong path was higher, or I could go somewhere where I can really tap into my faith, my spiritual and mental development. Um, and it would help me, it will help uplift me and help me see things from a different perspective. And I think, I'm happy that she was sensitive to that. And it wasn't like, I look back in hindsight now. It was almost, again, I can only attribute it to, her answering, her faith and her answering God and saying, we'll do it. And she trusted the process, and here we are today.
Have you always been a Republican, or did you were you Democrat at some point? Is your mom a Republican?
No, yeah, I was Democrat. I was registered Democrat. I can't say my values or anything looked at that. I think like everybody, once you begin to look at where your values align the most, at a certain point in your life, you start to do that. Whether some do it really early on, or they were raised in that, or they do it later on. I started to look at the values that my family has had since I was born. We really were conservative. Um, our faith, our appreciation for the freedom in our country and the Constitution, our the life that we lived, for and our belief in the system of free enterprise. Um, I looked at that, really closely before I made a decision to get into politics. And again, it was one that was truly value based because it definitely wasn't strategic because I was already at 3-to-1 odds in Newcastle. So, but I was bound and determined to not mislead the public. And when I went to ask them for their trust, I wanted to be sure that my values, that I upheld my values um, to the highest level. And um, yeah, so I wasn't always Republican or identified with the Republican affiliation based on our registration.
How do you feel about the conservative principle of limited government, small government, and social services? Helping poor people and things that you benefited from.
No, I think I'm big on local control. I think there's an area of the welfare system that desperately needs reform. I've seen it on multiple levels. I worked for, various state agencies through grants at local nonprofits. There's definitely areas of reform that's needed to help get folks from poverty to to get them out of poverty in a more expedient fashion. Um, I've experienced it even myself that some of the programs aren't they don't do that. So I see limited. My perspective of limited government is local control. If you can have the resources in our social service, like strong, prominent social service agencies, if you can have our state government release those, not have heavily funded programs that require, thousands of state level jobs. I don't think that doesn't do that makes the process from getting out of poverty much harder, and it's hard to navigate, for a lot of poor folks. Again, I can attest to that. Yeah, but I think small government is key. Even here in Newcastle, there's certain aspects of our budgeting, of our processing. What people to fail to see is that our city government has a mission, and that's to provide your services, streets, blight, uh, land use, community economic development, and we need to get back to that and focus on our mission for supporting the taxpayers rather than funding um, unnecessary programs you know
So you mentioned
just
getting
to do it.
getting people out of poverty. You see that as what the goal should be of the different services offered to people in need?
It just depends. I mean, there's so many aspects of poverty. You have folks that um, are reliant, especially those with disabilities, severe disabilities, where they may need continuous care, but that doesn't mean they can't live independently. And then there's ones that, like myself and my family, we just had a hard start to life, um, but though we were able to use, social service to our advantage to get out of our situation. Um, it just depends. It's the circumstances of where the individual is, and I think that's where I go back to, looking at things from a glass half full perspective, and really truly evaluating where you are in life, and making those decisions based on, the opportunity to live outside of a system. I see the social service system um, sometimes holding people back. It creates layers upon layers of dependence, and I don't think it should do that. It should really be, focus. I think education is a huge focal point, providing, basic needs such as food and shelter to those in need, um, and really helping to elevate no matter where you are, to get out of your situation. So I think that question, my answer would be that it would be based on circumstances, and that's where reform will come in to evaluate that and assess what needs to be done.
What do you tell the black community that a lot of people thinks being conservative, being Republican, associate that with bigotry and racism? And what do you tell those people about your involvement with the Republican Party and so far what your experience is?
I tell them I haven't experienced it faced on. I mean, from my perspective, I've talked to, I've been in almost every corner in every county of the state talking to Republicans. I haven't seen it. I haven't experienced it on my own. I think it's more on the character of who we are. Um, our character and how we carry ourselves. I think the black community, I think not even just the black community, I think in general, as a society, we use the media for our source of information rather than getting in front of people and actually having these types of conversations, and learning to, again, build relationships and understand one another. And again, looking at from your own, you know, it doesn't mean that you have to, you know, you know, be in every environment or every pocket of a community, but how do you operate in your community? How do you operate with those that are around you and your family, your friends? Um, I just kind of use my personal example. I haven't personally experienced anything. I know that's not true for all, but I think you put yourself out there and with the desire of learning it and building those understandings. And I don't see the races that other people see from the conservative party.
Okay.
You know, Chris, in addition to the servant leadership and some of the things that you already mentioned, can you talk about how you integrate your faith into your daily life, your thoughts, motivations, actions?
His righteousness and all things will be added unto you. I think, you know, I always say in speeches and things, I didn't grow up with doctors, lawyers, politicians in my family. We didn't have business owners. We had a lot of my family were ministers and pastors, and worked in social services and foster care and things like that. And I just I really truly seek the Lord in a lot of decisions and that I make for the people. And I think by doing so, I'm able to keep myself in a humble state, um, and focus on the issues at hand rather than again, self promotion and self interest to help get to another level. Um, I think that's very important in government itself. I also think I taught human diversity at Slippery Rock University for some time. And I taught to a class of varying professions, teachers, business students, doctors, and everything. I think it's important that we have that ability to take ourselves out of the situation and look at who we're serving. Service being one of the top ethical principles that I learned in social work, and being that service and giving that service to the people and doing it with from a humble state.
Really
Well,
appreciate this interview.
Great pleasure meeting you and talking to you, Chris.
yeah, I thank you so much for having me. I know May 17th is right around the corner, so with all things that we do is really to ask people. My goal again is to win the trust of the voters, and know that everything that I'm about is about them. It's really about getting to the bottom of our biggest issues that we have in our state, um, on the policy level and on the executive level, and really restoring and achieving success throughout Pennsylvania. So, thank you for your time, Bob and Sherry. It was a great interview, and hope the listeners enjoyed it.
Thank you.